Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker and welcome to episode 265, When Trust is Twisted, the long-term impact of manipulative relationships. Well, welcome to a new month, which is going to be all about how to take better care of yourself in your relationships, the ones with others and the one you have with yourself. And I think in order to do that, it's so important to first identify where there might be any toxicity around you. Because I have learned over the years that in order to create a safe place to work on ourselves and to take good care of ourselves, we first have to get the toxicity away from us as best we can, or at least to set some serious boundaries with it. Otherwise, it's hard to do the deeper work that we need to do. And if you need help with that, make sure you sign up for a Power Hour with me. I have some openings coming up for September if you'd like to do that. The link is in the show notes for that. If you have any questions, if you need to discuss it first, just hit the link and we'll figure that out. I also have a mini course ebook on healthy boundaries if you're just getting started on working on boundaries and you're not sure where to begin, which is what most people tell me when they're starting out. And that has some great worksheets and thought provokers and things to listen to get you started. And then I have a 3-part masterclass that some of you have taken and have said to me that it helped you a great deal to look at how you lost your voice along the way and to start getting it back. And if you really want to do some work and make some big changes, my Find Your Voice course is the best place to go. There is online learning, it's self-paced, it is real work that you do on yourself, and there is group coaching. So there are others there to help you along the way, to give you feedback and to create strong bonds with so that you feel safe to do the work. And you have a place where there's accountability and support and encouragement. And there's also private coaching with me. So please check that out. The link is in the show notes for that as well. And then there's a Facebook Live group where we're doing Facebook Lives every Wednesday night, just about. And that group is growing and it's a great, safe place for you to go. And that's where we talk about this stuff and we share about where we are and what we're struggling with and the things that we are accomplishing along the way. So it's a great, safe place to learn, change, and grow. Okay, so let's get into today's topic, which is one I have brought up before, I know, but I don't think you can talk about this stuff enough, especially because it can be so invisible and insidious. And that is manipulative relationships. And wherever they are on the continuum determines how safe they are. From one end where, okay, maybe your sister's a little defensive and passive aggressive, all the way down to maybe your boss is a sociopath and everything in between. And of course, the further down that continuum, the bigger the damage that will do. And that's what we want to remember. It does damage. And I think that we have dismissed that and minimized that over the years. And now we're finally taking it seriously. And I think it's so important. In fact, when I work with relationships, one of the biggest reasons why I see that people don't get better is because one person tends to manipulate, tends to BS, tends to pay lip service to the work and doesn't really want to do the work, or maybe they can't change. The prognosis isn't really great for entrenched narcissism. So it is really important to look at this and to see how it might be affecting you. So let's talk about what happens when we have consistent exposure to manipulative behavior and how it can erode our self-confidence. It can definitely increase our anxiety and hurt our personal development. Well, consistent exposure, which means this is someone that you work with, live with, married to, dating. It's your child. It's your neighbor that you hang out with all the time. That's what I mean by consistent. It's not a one-off or an every once in a while exposure, because exposure is everything when it comes to manipulation. Consistent exposure can have a profound and lasting effect on your mental and emotional well-being. And that is a fact. Because when someone is repeatedly subjected to manipulation, especially in relationships where trust and safety are supposed to be paramount, what can happen is it can slowly chip away at their self-confidence, increase their anxiety, and create all sorts of issues. So the first thing it does is it undermines your self-worth. So manipulative people are going to employ tactics like subtle put-downs, backhanded compliments, shifting blame, messing with your head, which make you doubt your abilities and worth. They question you. And so over time, this consistent undermining is going to cause you to internalize those negative messages. And that can really lead to a diminished sense of self-worth, even if you don't realize that that's happening. You might start to believe that you're not capable, competent, or deserving, and that is really going to damage your self-confidence over time. And you may not be aware of it because you may be so busy taking care of them or taking care of everyone else, you're not realizing the real reasons why you're backing away from opportunities, you're not putting yourself out there, that kind of thing. So it happens very insidiously. So it won't be overt most of the time. Because again, overt we can see. If a partner called you names and was abusive, you would see that, and you would see that it's wrong and you're not crazy. I'm talking about the subtle stuff that you don't see, and you absorb it and you don't even realize you're absorbing it. Another thing that it can do is create dependency. And again, you don't see this happening. This is a slow, slippery slope over time. Because manipulators often use tactics like guilt tripping or playing the victim to make you feel responsible for their happiness or well-being. But they're doing this so subtly, you don't see it. So what happens is this can create a real sense of dependency where you feel you can't make decisions or take actions unless they're okay with it. Maybe they'll lose it. Maybe they'll shut down. Maybe they'll mope. Maybe they'll play victim, whatever. And so you don't want them to be unhappy. Another thing that happens is a definite increase in anxiety because you're going to get into maybe even a low level, but a constant state of hypervigilance. Because when you're around someone who's manipulative, especially in a close relationship, you have to be on high alert because you are constantly second guessing the other person's intentions and you're trying to avoid triggering their negative reactions. So this is going to lead to a low-level fight or flight state, which leads to chronic anxiety because you're always anticipating the next manipulative move or the emotional outburst or both, or the mind effery where they're laying it on and hoovering and trying to suck you back in, and then they are awful 24 hours later. So the roller coaster is a big part of it too, which leads into the next thing, uncertainty and fear. So what happens is it creates that fog that you've heard about, that confusion, that doubt. You might be gaslighted into questioning your perceptions or memories, leading to like this persistent sense of uncertainty, and you don't realize it. But it creates this low-level fear in you, which can make you worry about making the wrong decision, saying the wrong thing, or just being yourself, being authentic. And this can become really pervasive. It can go everywhere in your life. I've seen it happen. One toxic relationship can create big problems for someone in other areas of their life. The other thing is our growth gets stunted. And this is hard because when I work with people, they don't see it till later and then they're kicking themselves. Because what happens is when you're in a relationship with someone who's toxic, your focus is probably going to shift from your own goals and your own aspirations to managing the manipulator's emotions and demands, even if you don't see that happening. So you tend to neglect your own stuff because you become consumed with keeping the peace and or trying to avoid conflict or be super collaborative, super rescuing, compensating for them, parenting them. We've talked about this stuff in other episodes. But over time, what can happen is you're going to lose sight of your passions and your dreams and your identity. We lose ourselves in relationships where we cannot be authentic and we can't have boundaries. So then there's the avoidance of growth opportunities. You're not going to feel strong enough to put yourself out there. We won't put ourselves out there if we're in this low-level fight or flight or freeze. We're just not. We're probably going to avoid challenging ourselves because we're in survival mode. You're at the bottom of Maslow's scale. You don't even feel safe, much less feel like you have the courage to go take some big risk in your life or put yourself out there. And so what happens is it continues to erode your perception of your ability to exceed. So you're going to start avoiding more, and you're going to avoid things that can help you grow both personally and professionally. Deep down, a lot of people that I worked with are afraid to step out of their comfort zone because they also fear the manipulator's response. And this is combined with how their own self-esteem has been hammered over time. It's not a good combination. And this goes hand in hand with isolation and withdrawal. So as your anxiety goes up and your self-confidence goes down, and again, this is incremental, so you don't see it happening. You may start to withdraw from social situations. You might avoid interactions that are going to lead to people making comments or questioning because they love you and they care about you. So you're going to miss out on a lot of things, and you're going to miss out on the much needed support and love and encouragement and truth from other people. It's one of the first things I do when I start working with clients who are in these situations is I need you to reconnect with your best friend, and I need you to tell them what's going on. You need them right now. So the long-term consequences of consistent exposure can be profound. And I have sat with people where it has taken them years to rebuild their self-confidence and regain a sense of security and control over their own life. The lingering effects of manipulation can really make it difficult for them to trust other people. It makes it hard for them to want to form new healthy relationships or maybe go after goals. It's hard for them to find the enthusiasm and the confidence and the energy they once had, because think about it. For a while, they're just trying to heal from all that trauma. And they've been changed. The other piece that we've talked about here on the show before is also a lot of them end up having physical ailments because their cortisol levels are so high. They have hives, they have autoimmune diseases, blood pressure issues, all sorts of stuff. And it's because of being in this chronic stage of survival. But I also watch them as they learn to recognize the patterns. They start to seek support, whether they get therapy, coaching, support groups, all the above. And they learn how to heal and get back to themselves. So the biggest thing we want to talk about is patterns. Recognizing the patterns in your relationships. That's what matters. It's not a one-off. We can all have a crappy day and be a butt. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about patterns of behavior. We want to talk about how to identify manipulation as a pattern over time, especially in your close relationships. Here's why. This is crucial because these behaviors, what happens is they often become normalized and overlooked because they're subtle. They just get folded in the batter and you don't even see them. That's why the first order of business is to create awareness around this so we can see them and name them. So here's some things that you can start doing to start recognizing signs of manipulation in the moment when it's happening. The first one is pay attention to your emotional reactions. Start paying attention to your immediate, like in the first nanosecond emotional reaction when you're interacting with someone. Do you feel anxious? Do you feel guilty? Do you feel angry? Do you feel guarded, confused? Because these emotions are usually red flags that manipulation is happening, even if on the face of it, everything looks fine. You're paying attention to your body and your subconscious, okay? Those two are going to pick up on things your rational mind is not going to see at first. The next thing you want to pay attention to is unusual behavior. Like notice if you find yourself behaving in ways that are kind of like out of character, like maybe excessively apologizing or withdrawing or going quiet. agreeing to things you don't want to do, doing a lot of people-pleasing behavior that you don't do with other people. And another big one is lashing out. I have to work with clients a lot on this. And you've heard me say before, a lot of times, if you see one person in the relationship that has their hair on fire and they're angry all the time and they're irritable and they're controlling and all the things, but they're not like this with everyone in their life, only like one person, there's usually a manipulator standing behind them, has been my experience. And so that is a trauma response. They're just trying to protect themselves, and they're trying to get the manipulator to see their ways, because if not, they know this isn't going to end well. Another thing you can pay attention to is feeling obligated. Like, do you feel this overwhelming sense of obligation or duty towards another person? Especially if it seems disproportionate to the situation. If you end up doing a lot of rescuing. So those are some things you can look for. And then let's talk about repeated patterns over time. Consistent emotional drain is a big one. If you find yourself consistently feeling drained, anxious, and insecure after you interact with someone, you want to look beyond the individual reactions to see if there's a pattern. Because manipulation can have a slow buildup, which leads to like this eventually having all these negative emotions, right? And that can go unnoticed if you don't track it. And that makes sense. And it does make sense because erosion of trust builds up over time with people. It's a lot of little things that add up. And you start feeling really wiped out and just anxious and angry and insecure. The other thing to look for pattern-wise, and I find this to be really helpful for clients, is look for repeated behaviors. Manipulators often use the same tactics repeatedly, and they all look at the same textbook, I swear to you. It's a universal textbook, like guilt tripping, playing the victim, shifting blame, messing with your head, being nice than nasty than nice, using rage to teach you not to bring things up to them, being defensive, pretending they don't understand something that you know they completely understand. So look at past interactions. Do you notice these behaviors cropping up again and again? It helps you to detach and get back to you the more that you recognize patterns. I'm not asking you to hyper-focus on this person, and you probably already are hyper-focused without realizing it. What I am asking you to do is pay attention to the patterns so you can see them and you can see that those are about them and you're not crazy. The other thing that people share with me all the time are the cycles, the cyclical dynamics. So manipulation creates this cycle where the person being manipulated feels relief when they comply, followed by stress and anxiety as the cycle repeats. Okay, so if you feel trapped in this cycle of conflict, compliance, and then temporary peace, it's like the abuse honeymoon cycle right there. It's the same stuff. It's not going to get better on its own. It's just going to keep repeating the pattern. Look for erosion of boundaries, because over time, manipulative behaviors can really hurt personal boundaries. So have you found yourself gradually compromising on your values, ignoring your needs, ignoring your desires just to keep the peace? Or have they created so much chaos in your life that there isn't even time or energy or money for you to even focus on your own needs or your own values? This slow erosion is a very common sign of manipulation, and that is that it's becoming ingrained in your relationship. Okay, so those are some things to look for, but now I want to talk about why it's so hard to see the patterns sometimes. And I'm hoping that this will help you, if you don't already know this stuff, to feel better about yourself if you haven't been seeing these things till now. Do not be hard on yourself. Remember, if you saw it before, you would have done something before. But the whole point of manipulation is you can't see it. It is so insidious and crazy-making and subtle. And everything on paper looks fine, but it's not. And that's why we have to really dig and look for this stuff. So the first one is normalization of behavior. So especially in your close relationships with loved ones, manipulative behaviors can become normalized. So the person being manipulated just comes to accept these behaviors as just the way things are. Because you've been exposed to them for such a long time and you've been gaslit the whole time into thinking that there's nothing wrong with them. I mean, there's just layers of this stuff. The other thing is there's emotional attachment. We know that when there are emotional ties, it makes it harder for us to see manipulation clearly. Like if that's your partner, your parent, your friend, your sister, you're probably going to spend a lot of time downplaying, rationalizing, doing whatever you need to do to ignore the harmful behavior because you want to preserve the relationship. And boy, that makes sense. If that's your kid, if that is your partner that you have kids with, if that's your parent, if that's been your best friend for 20 years, that's hard. The other thing that you need to remember is they're very good at what they do. And something we don't talk about enough is that intermittent reinforcement. This is why people stay so long or they go back to that relationship. Because manipulators will 9 times out of 10 mix in so much positive behavior with negative tactics that will confuse you and make it harder to recognize manipulation as a consistent pattern. So the occasional kindness or affection, the going to therapy and saying, I really want to work on this stuff. I mean, I've seen them do everything. And it creates this false hope and this relief that the behavior will change. And then the can just gets kicked another 3 months and another 6 months and another 9 months. And they know that. They know that. That's what keeps you there. What can really help is tracking and journaling. So if you have a journal or a record of interactions where you feel manipulated, this can help you see the patterns more clearly as well. Because you're going to see the themes and the tactics, and you're going to see what happens when, like typically, if you set a boundary as manipulative behavior, you're going to get blowback, you're going to pay dearly if they get caught doing something, if you confront them, if you say no to them when they want something for themselves. The other thing that's really important is getting feedback from other people. You have to have people in your life who know what's going on. It is the opposite of what I recommend typically. Typically, I'd say, no, that's your relationship with that parent or sister or partner. Don't bring other people into it, except for this. You need people to know exactly what's going on, not sugar-coated, the real skinny, so that they can be there for you. Because remember, these people might be very nice to your friends, very nice to your colleagues, because they're not going to show them their nasty side. So it is really important, especially when you are with people with covert narcissism, you have to share what's going on. It's really important to recognize and name the behavior because once a pattern is identified, it is really, really important to call it for what it is, manipulation. You have to. If you try to say it's something else, like, oh, they're just having a bad day, or oh, they're just mad, or oh, they struggle with avoidance and this, you will continue to gaslight yourself and you will continue just to normalize all the bad behavior. That's why it's important. People who are just having a bad day can look in the mirror and they don't lose their shit on you when you quietly say, hey, what you did last night hurt my feelings. Okay? Looking at boundary work. So when you figure out the patterns, you can start setting boundaries to protect yourself from further manipulation. Maybe you assert your needs more clearly. There's going to be blowback if you do with some people. Maybe you limit contact. Maybe you just make whatever decisions you need to make in your life to take care of yourself. When we don't connect what happens to our self-worth with manipulation, we can rationalize and minimize the whole situation and not realize that the damage that it does, especially not just to your self-worth, but the trust in the relationship is gone. You can't have manipulation and have trust in a relationship because when you have manipulation, you don't have boundaries. you don't have people being in a place of choice and owning their behavior. That's what creates trust and emotional safety. We can negotiate agreements. We can partner together. We can have everyone in a place of choice. Manipulation is a really powerful tool that can subtly and insidiously erode your sense of self. It's going to make you doubt your own perceptions and your self-worth. And this can have great impacts in your life and on your health. So let's talk about more specifically how this happens. How does manipulation really erode your perception? Well, the big one we've been talking about a lot lately is gaslighting. So gaslighting is a manipulative tactic whereas manipulator causes you to question your reality, your memories, your perceptions. It is one of the most insidious forms of manipulation because it directly attacks your sense of reality. And over time, being gaslit might make you start doubting your own experiences, your own memories. It's going to create confusion. You're not going to trust your ability to discern truth from falsehood, like the fake news thing. So guess what? You're going to trust yourself less and you're going to look for them for validation and direction. There's also subtle undermining that happens where there's little put downs or questioning you or backhanded compliments or the passive aggressive remarks. And that's meant to chip away at your self-confidence. It's a power grab. And yeah, these comments might be framed as jokes or concerns. They do that on purpose, though, because it makes it difficult for you to confront them directly. They'll say, "What? I was just joking." What happens is over time, you internalize this confusion, you internalize the negative messages, even if on the face of it you say, hell no. If you are exposed to this enough over time, your subconscious is adaptive. It will slowly start to believe them. Okay? And that's why they're doing it, because they can't have you be strong. Blame shifting is another one, when they avoid taking responsibility for their actions and they shift everything onto you. They twist situations to make it seem like poor them, like you're the one that's at fault of any conflict or problem, regardless of the circumstances. It is stunning how quickly they can do this and how well they can do this, where all of a sudden now you're the bad guy. You're going to have guilt and shame. You're going to start feeling like you're too sensitive or you're overreacting or you're not good enough or you're asking for too much or you're controlling or you're perfectionistic. When no one else in your life is coming up to you and saying that to you, because that's not how you are. So the big loss here is loss of identity and loss of health. So if you are being constantly manipulated, you're going to lose touch with your own desires, your needs, your values, your boundaries, what you know to be true, and your sense of self becomes intertwined with their expectations instead of your own. Because they're prioritizing their own agenda and you're going along and you don't even realize it. Because again, it is such a slippery slope. So this is going to lead you to feel disconnected from who you are. It leads to a sense of emptiness and confusion, and it's going to be hard to express your true feelings and to know who you are outside of that relationship. And then what happens a lot of times is you can then start going after your other relationships outside of this one and start doubting authenticity of them and start pushing people away and picking fights with them as opposed to the person who's causing all of this. It can also, and we know this, lead to you withdrawing from potentially healthy relationships because how are you going to trust your ability to judge who's safe and who isn't? And the person who is manipulating is going to pit and split. They're going to start talking smack about these other people to make you question the people outside of this relationship. That's what they do because they don't want you having a lot of support. Because if you have a lot of support and you put the Kool-Aid cup down, there's going to be a problem. Which is why I encourage clients, the first thing you want to do is get some healthier people around you so that you can see the contrast between healthy and unhealthy. So let's give a few quick examples before we go. So let's say you have an overbearing boss. So maybe you're the talented employee, but you consistently receive subtle put downs and you're manipulating and taking on more work without recognition because the boss uses guilt. They say things like, you're the only one that can handle this. And yet all the backhanded compliments to keep you feeling undervalued and stuck keeps you there. And over time, you become more anxious, you doubt your abilities, you start avoiding work that you once enjoyed. There aren't any boundaries because you're being manipulated into thinking that you can't ask for what you need, that you should take on all this work. And this can be done very subtly in conversations. What about the manipulative partner? They use guilt tripping and emotional blackmail. They do the if you loved me, you would. They play the victim, they avoid accountability, and they shift blame to you during conflicts. If you confront them, there's usually hell to pay. And what about the controlling parent? You're an adult child. If you're still under the influence of a parent who uses manipulation to maintain control, they're going to use guilt. What do you mean you can't come home for Christmas? Or after all I've done for you, you can't come over here and do this? Or the big one, triangulation. They call your sister to call you and have your sister tell you how upset they are that you haven't called them. There are as many forms of manipulation as there are people in the world. And so we can't go through all of them today. My encouragement is keep looking into tactics, keep watching videos on it, keep reading about it, keep noticing things, keep talking about it, keep looking for patterns in your relationships. If you don't feel safe and relaxed around certain people, there's usually a very good reason why. If you can feel safe around at least a few people, then that tells you it's probably not you not being able to trust anyone or be open with anyone. So today we talked about the insidious nature of manipulation and how it can have such a profound impact on our self-perception and our self-worth and our health. Manipulation, particularly in close relationships, often goes unnoticed for a long time as it subtly undermines your confidence, distorts your reality, and really erodes your sense of identity over time. We talked about gaslighting and blame shifting and subtle undermining and how it can make you doubt your own head and your own experiences. And it leads you to question your value and your place in the relationship. It hurts your self-esteem and traps you in this cycle of awful and wonderful and awful and wonderful, and it keeps kicking the can. So we talked about the long-term effects on your mental health and your personal growth and your physical health, and how the best thing to do first is to start tracking the patterns so that you don't feel crazy, so you see what's really going on, so you can have a really healthy assessment of the relationship and then get some good support around you. It's so important. You can't do this work alone, especially not when you're dealing with manipulation. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today around a heavy topic in some regards. Hopefully this was helpful. If you think someone else could really benefit from listening to this, please pass it along. If you don't get the newsletter, you can message me on social and I'll get that out to you. It's got all the great stuff. It has the blog, it has all the announcements, links to the next podcast show, and all of the other workshops. All right, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.